It's one of the world's longest running conflicts. In fact, North and South Korea have been at war for 65 years. Now they say they want to finally end this nuclear standoff that threatens an entire region. But these two countries have made promises of peace before, which came to nothing. So what's different this time? These speakers used to blast propaganda from South to North Korea. Now they're being dismantled. The clocks tell different times, but their time zones could soon be synchronized. Once sworn enemies, Korea's leaders shook hands and a North Korean leader crossed the border into the south for the first time ever. Dictator Kim Jong-un has promised an end to the North's pursuit of nuclear weapons. It's a stunning change of fortune after more than half a century of nuclear tension. So what about the Trump effect? President Trump is trying to take credit for the recent breakthrough. He's even been touted to win a Nobel Peace Prize. He did definitely put pressure on Kim, from insulting him on Twitter to announcing unilateral sanctions. He's agreed, in principle, to hold talks with Kim Jong-un, which would make him the first serving US president to meet a North Korean leader. And the US is demanding the denuclearization of the country. In what has been a fairly confusing, even contradictory area for Trump, foreign policy, arguably North Korea is his one clear strategy.
I think I have a responsibility to see if I can do it. It's certainly something that I hope I can do for the world.
I spoke with Aidan Foster Carter, a North Korean expert who has researched the country for decades. I asked him about Trump's impact.
Quite a lot of people in South Korea, whatever they think of Trump, think that maybe all that, the threats, the bluster, the my button's bigger than your button and stuff, that may have bounced the North Koreans a bit. That and the very separate factor of ever tighter UN and other economic sanctions, which are definitely squeezing him.
Whether Trump is a defining force or not, there's no doubt the situation has changed dramatically in a few short months. But to understand how peace has become a possibility, it's important to know the history. So what started the 65-year standoff? The Korean War was one of the bloodiest ever fought. The communist state in the north invaded the south in 1950. America, Russia, China, and others got sucked into the fighting that followed. The British did too. In fact, 100,000 British service personnel were sent in.
A terrible, terrible war. Something like 4 million people died altogether. North Korea was bombed to bits. The older North Koreans obviously remember, and younger North Koreans, you can be sure, are taught assiduously about the hated Americans. It's been a very formative experience for both states, basically.
After 3 years, millions of fighters and civilians had died, and the result was stalemate. A massively militarized border here along the 38th parallel, and the threat of nuclear destruction if the uneasy truce broke down. US commanders seriously considered dropping atom bombs on their communist enemies at the height of the war. And for decades afterwards, batteries of American warheads remained in South Korea, while nuclear-armed Russia and China supported the North. South Korea became a modern democracy, a US ally, while the North stayed frozen in time, a secretive, isolated Stalinist state. So what did the Kim dynasty do to North Korea? North Korea's first leader was Kim Il-sung. Bombarded daily by state propaganda, his people called him the heavenly leader. If he didn't agree, well, dissidents were sent to labor camps, and rivals to the ruling Kim dynasty were ruthlessly purged. After his death in 1997 came his son, Kim Jong-il, just as brutal to his own people and equally unstable on the global stage. Following his death in 2011, Kim Jong-un came to power. Despite his youth, well, he's only in his 30s, although no one knows his exact age, and despite his education in Switzerland, Kim appeared to promise more of the same. He even had his own uncle executed 2 years after coming to power. North Korea kept goading its opponents by testing nuclear weapons and ballistic missiles. For North Koreans, life has changed little. It's still brutal.
It is still grim despite change at the margins. North Korea, measurably, North Koreans are smaller. I mean, that it's inscribed on their bodies how they've had over 70 years now of basically repression. It's really unimaginably controlled.
So what's surprising about the recent developments? Kim appeared to make a revealing admission during recent talks. He said he was embarrassed by his country's poor transport infrastructure. North Korean leaders don't tend to be this honest about the country's economic woes, even when struggling to cope with regular famines. It's possible that the threat of economic sanctions has swayed Kim, or that he's a different kind of leader to his father and grandfather. But Korea watchers think we should be wary about a breakthrough.
It's hard not to be moved by the spectacle, but we have seen these agreements before, so there has to be a certain amount of caution as to whether it's all going to be implemented or not.
In the 1990s, Pyongyang reached an agreement with the US to dismantle nuclear reactors and accept inspectors, but failed to stick to the deal. Kim's apparent willingness to strike a new nuclear bargain may be more pragmatic than anything else. Chinese experts believe that the mountain base where North Korea tests most of its nukes has collapsed under the stress of massive explosions, forcing Kim to suspend the testing program. The regime deny this and say they could continue if they wanted, but are showing good faith. But the nuclear question is driving uncertainty over any possible deal. For the first time in 20 years, both North and South Korea seem serious about plans for peace. There is a real belief that the countries could officially end this conflict after 65 years. But the US is demanding North Korea gives up its nuclear arsenal as part of the deal. Aidan Foster Carter says peace between the two countries is very possible. But the US probably won't get what it wants, at least not yet.
If a peace process is built on the peninsula, then both South and North Korea can turn around to the US and say, just be patient here. We are heading, denuclearization is the big one. We will get there. We have to have confidence building on the peninsula first.